Saint Maria Goretti was born in 1890. She died in 1902 as a martyr. She was the oldest child in the family. Her father died when Maria was only 10 years old. And she would stay at home and watch her little brothers as well as neighbors' children so that the parents could go out into the fields and work. Well, there was a young man, 18 years old, named Alessandro Serenelli, who was lusting after Maria. And several times he attempted to seduce her, but she refused him every time. And he just grew more and more angry. On July 2nd, 1902, she was sitting on the stairwell of her small cottage, and she was mending a shirt. A cart stopped out in front of the house. It was Alessandro. And he came to her, and again, he grabbed her and threw her into a bedroom. And she refused his advances. And she said to him, Alessandro, it's a mortal sin. If you die, you will go to hell. I will not give in to you. And with that, he began stabbing her, and he stabbed her 14 times. She was taken to the hospital. In the hospital, Maria, just a beautiful young child, her mother came, and she was concerned about where her mother would sleep. She forgave her assassin and said that she hoped that he would be in heaven with her one day. She was uneducated, never went to school. She couldn't read or write, but her faith was so strong. At the age of 12, she had just made her first communion. That was the age for first communion at the time. And she cherished receiving the Eucharist. She received viaticum, the Holy Eucharist, just before she died, 24 hours after Alessandro stabbed her. He went to prison. He was sentenced to prison for 30 years. After, I think it was after 8 or 10 years in the prison, one night he had a dream. He was very angry, very surly, but he had a dream in which he saw Maria gathered some flowers, and she presented the bouquet of flowers to him. It so touched him, that dream, that he repented of what he had done. And after 28 years, he was released from prison, and the first thing he did, he went to Maria's mother, who was 82 years old at the time, and asked for her forgiveness. And of course, she granted the forgiveness, and the two of them received communion together at Christmas Day Mass. When she was canonized in 1947, 250,000 people came to the canonization. It was the largest one in history. And also present at the canonization for the first time in history was her mother. It was the first time that the mother of a martyr and saint was at the canonization. And along with her were a sister and a brother, and Alessandro Serenelli, the man who murdered her. He wept in tears the whole time that he was there. He became a third order Franciscan a few years before he died. So repentant was of what he did. She's a wonderful example of how faith is such a wonderful gift. And in her innocence, Maria had no intellectual education, but she had a faith that was so strong, and she believed so much in everything that Jesus taught. And so much so that she defended her virginity. There are many today that would say that was ridiculous. They couldn't understand that at all, why someone would die rather than give in and lose her virginity. But Maria saw that this was so very important. It was God's will. And so we have a great saint in our time for people who think that self-control, chastity, purity, this sexual revolution, so to speak, always in front of us, that it's not possible to be virtuous. But a 12-year-old girl tells us it is. And her canonization as a saint lets us know that with the grace of God, all things are possible. and that ultimately doing God's will and asking for his grace, he will grant it. He granted her the grace of martyrdom rather than commit a mortal sin. And so it's well for us to pray to Maria Goretti for all the people in our time that just say that that self-control is impossible. A young girl like her teaches us that with the grace of God, it certainly is. So we thank the Lord today for the gift of this young saint, who's a model of chastity for us and a model of true faith in God against all odds. Let us stand and offer our prayers and petitions.